Hello. Thanks for joining me. If you're here live or recorded, I'm going to get right into it if Leo will let me. So I'm going to talk about the 2022 Indianapolis Monumental Marathon. That's the full name of it, which I ran on November 5th, so 4 days ago. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about how that was on the heels of having run the Chicago Marathon 27 days before. So for context, if you don't know me or anything like that, I ran the Chicago Marathon October 2022 after taking 10 years off from running long distance, and the only other marathon I had ever run was Chicago 2012. So this was sort of like a reintroduction back into long distance running. That being said, it's not like I've been sitting on the couch for the past 10 years. I've just not been running long distance. So ran Chicago in October. Had never in my wildest dreams thought I would run 2 marathons in the same calendar year, let alone within 4 weeks of each other. I actually, after 2012, said I was never running another marathon. So for context, because I think it's important for you to know that you might be watching this right now thinking I will never run a marathon, and let me tell you, stranger things have happened, and if it's something that you're interested in doing, I'm 100% going to tell you you should do it. Okay, so after Chicago Marathon, we had about 4 weeks. So what do you do in between those what do you do in between 2 long distance races? So the first week was rested a few days, and by the end of the week I went on a couple shorter runs. The whole point basically of the weeks in between 2 long distance races is mostly to focus on recovery. It's not to get stronger, it's not to get faster, it's to recover, make sure any injuries or anything that you have are taken care of, and then get ready to do it all over again. So I came out of Chicago feeling really good, very few injuries, other than just being tired. So that first week I took it easy, went on a couple short runs, then I went out of town, went to New York, completely overdid it, ran my body into the ground, came back slightly injured, but nothing that, some good PT and acupuncture couldn't fix. And so then the next 2 weeks or so, again, some 3 to 10 mile runs, and that was it. And then the week of Indianapolis, I think I ran a 3 miler and a 4 miler, and that was it. So lots and lots of time to recover, to eat, to rest, relax. I did, the week of Indianapolis Marathon, come down with a pretty bad cough or allergies. I don't know what it was. Probably in the end it was a good thing because it kept me from overdoing it during race week, and I slept a lot, hung out at home a lot, and made sure I ate enough. Okay, so I went to Indianapolis. I live in Chicago. Went to Indianapolis on Friday. That was, you could go Thursday or Friday for packet pickup. I went Friday. It's a super easy drive if you're coming from Chicago, 3 hours. If you were driving super fast, you could have made it in less time, but easy peasy drive. Got to Indianapolis. The expo was small, but honestly, it had everything that the huge expos have, just less booths. So it had all the stuff that you would want to buy maybe at a Chicago or a world major. It just had less of all of them. So I thought it was really nice and manageable. I got this shirt because the race shirts are awful. So I bought this. And then I just walked around Indianapolis for a couple hours by myself, which was nice, and then I went to bed. And in the morning, Saturday was the race, woke up, and it's really cool how Indianapolis has it set up. You get access to their convention center, which is really, really close to the start line. So we had wind and rain and not the best weather to be standing in your start corral for a long time. So you could hang out there, you could gear check there. Great setup as far as race day goes. I did have one snafu, is I decided last minute to leave the convention center, go back to my hotel, drop some stuff off, and come back to the convention center. By the time I got back, literally it was a ghost town. I had minor panic attack. Oh my gosh, where's the start line? Because I had planned to follow the crowd, but all is well. Eventually found the start. I had wanted to run with the 4:30 pace group. I couldn't find them. So that was a little disappointing because I had wanted to go. I went into this race hoping to beat my Chicago time by a few minutes. My body felt really, really good, and I really thought I could have done it. But I couldn't find the pace group. So anyways, unlike Chicago and the other like really, really big races, you don't have to wait in your corral for like an hour and a half for your start, which is really nice and helpful. The race began at 8 and I was crossing the start line by 8:15, and I put myself in corral D, so like A, B, C, 4 corrals back, and I still only had to wait 15 minutes. It was raining at the start, but it was like 66 degrees, pretty humid, and the rain didn't feel horrible. At that time, the wind was not bad yet, and you'll hear about the wind. So I actually tried to run with the pacer there's also a half marathon that's running while the marathon's going. So I was like, okay, I'll run with the half marathon pacer and then split off when they go. And my watch was actually working really well. It did not work in Chicago. I used my same Apple Watch. So that's something to note. Indianapolis, I think the GPS worked really well. Some people had said that it wouldn't work in the downtown area. I had no issues. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna run with the 10:45 pacer for the beginning and then split off. I hope she's not watching. I doubt she is, but she was definitely running faster than her pace was supposed to be. And I think part of this is because she stopped at all the water aid stations, so she was like building in that time. So she had like built in enough time that she could have her group stop at all the water stations, and then she would have to go faster to kind of make up that time. I don't like running like that, and I didn't need to stop at the water stations that early on. So that plan didn't work out all that well for me, and that's okay. That's how I learn. So the first few miles are like in the downtown. You pass some stadiums, some monuments. The crowd support this is hard for me to really gauge because my only frame of reference for marathons is Chicago, where you have huge crowd support like the whole time. There were people out. I assume there would have been more if the weather hadn't been that crummy. But it was fine. There was enough to look at. We were pretty crowded at the beginning, but by like the second mile, it was pretty broken up enough. Anyway, so a little bit of rain, cool stuff to look at. And I probably from like mile 3 on to like 7, I don't remember a whole lot. Which is good. I think I was just kind of cruising, and I fell into my own pace. I was running like 10:30, and I felt really, really good, and I was really excited about that. And then around mile 7, there's like a division. You decide if you're running the full or the half. I was running full, and I had like no doubt about it. I was like, I feel good. I'm going to be able to do this, no problem. So we split off, and then you run kind of like along like some busy roads for a while, and you end up running through neighborhoods which have like really big mansions, pretty cool stuff to look at. Not a ton of fans or crowd support, but aid stations everywhere. Like we had water, noon hydration, or it was noon, I think called noon endurance, so like instead of Gatorade, every mile or so there was plenty of water. There were a few aid stations that had blown over from the wind, but it didn't really make that big of a difference because they were well supported. There were a few stations that had goo. There were a few stations that had like oranges and pretzels and things like that. So very, very well supported. Props to Indianapolis Monumental, like well supported race. So I'm trying to think of the miles, like give you more details of the course. But what I remember is the downtown, then the residential area, which I found out later. We ran past the governor's mansion, but I didn't know that. But just like cool houses to look at. So the miles are kind of going by pretty fast. For me, it felt slightly hilly at times because I'm used to running totally flat. If you live somewhere that's hilly, this would not be hilly for you. But if you live somewhere like Chicago, you would notice the hills. There were quite a few inclines, but not horrible. And then around mile 13, I remember it started raining again, But I still felt really, really good. And then probably between 13 and 16, I started noticing some of the hills. I have a really hard time around mile 15 to 18 mentally, because it's like, okay, we've hit the halfway mark. Mile 14 is exciting because you're like, I'm past the halfway mark. But then from like 15 to 18, to me, we're kind of like, well, there's no more like milestones, and I still have a lot of race left. So those miles just mentally are all really hard for me, like during any sort of run. But I just kept thinking to myself, just run the mile that you're in. So that's something that like I really want other people to use. It's a mantra I was taught, and it was really, really helpful. Stop thinking about how much you have ran. Stop thinking about how much you have to run or how hard it's going to get. Just run the mile that you're in. And I just kept repeating that to myself over and over again. And let me tell you, it worked, because all of a sudden we're like at mile 18. Like those miles just kind of flew by once I decided, like, just stop thinking about pace, stop thinking about the weather, just run the mile that you're in. Eventually we ran through Butler University, and I love college campuses, so I was like super pumped about that. There was like no students out, which was mind-blowing to me, because if this were my college, granted I graduated 100 years ago, we would have made a huge party and like totally supported whatever race was running through, but there was like nobody out. So that was a little, kind of a bummer, but still cool to look at. After Butler, we ran through like a park, which was really cute, and like had like some stuff to look at, because a lot of those other miles too were sort of just kind of boring. They're just like along like interstate almost, or like, I don't know how to describe it. Sort of like the streets you drive past in any small city in America that's just like strip malls and in two-way roads. So anything that was like a little different was exciting. So like the university and the park. At one point we ran down like an exit ramp, so that was kind of cool. And there was quite a bit of downhill. I did talk about how there's uphill. There was also quite a bit of downhill, which is tempting to sprint down, but I was smart enough to know that if I did that, my quads would be completely trashed, and I knew I still needed them. So I just kept an even pace. And then eventually we got into like, I guess sort of like a service road. It wasn't open to any traffic, and it was just tree lined, and it was really quiet, and that was really nice. At that point, the winds had really picked up. I think the winds really picked up for me around mile 16. And we're talking 30 to 50 mile an hour winds, like major winds, like news, like channels covering it. It was so windy that at that point around mile 16, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to hit the pace that I want. So just continue to run the race that you're in here, run the miles that you're in, and just keep going. It was a little disappointing because my body felt so good, but I just could not compete with the wind. When I'm telling you, like, I thought at some point I was running forward, I felt like I was running backwards. They were just these gusts of winds, and you felt like you're running in like quicksand. A lot of people were walking. 100% no shame in walking ever, but for me, if I start walking during a long distance run or race, I don't want to start running again. So I did walk through the aid stations to get water and food, but I tried really hard, and I don't think I did it all, not to walk at any other point. And after the race, just like talking to people that I met at the restaurants and the bars, a lot of people were talking about the walking, and they were like, yeah, I've never seen so many people walking. And the people who were walking were like, I just couldn't compete with the wind and just kind of gave up. But for me, I was like, I'd rather just get this over with, and if I walk, it's just going to take a whole lot longer. So I kept going. I remember seeing the mile 19 sign. There were some mile markers that were knocked down by the wind. So I was glad that my watch was working, so I knew where I was mile-wise. I remember seeing 19, and then when I saw 20, like 20 to me is a big deal, because like, okay, all we have left is a 10K. You can run 10K in your sleep. A lot of people say the marathon starts at mile 20, and I would agree to some extent. Most people are conditioned enough that you can run 20 miles. You've done it during your training. And so the last 10K is when, kind of you want to see what you're made of. And again, my body felt really good. And I think if the wind hadn't been so windy, I probably could have raced that last 10K and really picked up my pace, but I couldn't. So I just did the best that I could. And the last, I would say 20 to 23, I don't remember too much about what those miles were. I think part of that was when we were on like the kind of quieter road. But then the last couple miles, you're headed back into downtown Indianapolis, and you can see like the big government buildings, and you can like start to like smell the finish line, if you will. And so that was kind of gave me a little motivation to be like, all right, just like give it everything you have. The end is near. And looking at my watch, my times afterwards, I was able to pick up my pace those last 2 miles. So I don't know if the wind had died down or if I was just running on like pure adrenaline and able to kick it up a little bit. So the last 2 miles was just like straight away into the city. And then I actually thought I was much closer to the finish line than I was. We never had a mile 26 marker, which I'm grateful for, because that last 0.2 can seem excruciating. But I didn't know when we went from like mile 25 to mile 26. I was just like, just run. I'm assuming the mile marker blew over, but maybe it was there. I don't know. And then so you run into the downtown. There weren't a ton of people out like around that last mile or so. There were people, but not a ton. Again, my frame of reference is Chicago. And then the like finishing chute is pretty long. I would say it's over a half mile. So that was a little, again, threw me off. I'm like, I really have no idea how much mileage I have left. So I just kind of went for it and ran, cross finished. But really, really good. I felt really good throughout the whole race. Unfortunately, my time was 12 minutes slower than Chicago. But it is what it is. It's still 2 marathons in 27 days, something I never would have dreamed of doing. Things that I could have done better, probably, honestly, I don't know, other than just being a stronger runner who could have competed with the wind. Things that I think I did really well was, again, just running the race I was in, running the miles that I was in. My nutrition was totally fine. I had 0 GI issues, didn't have to use the bathroom. I felt really good. I brought honey stinger blocks with me. That's what I always bring with me. My handheld water bottle was leaking, so that was annoying. I had to actually stop for water every couple miles because I couldn't drink it out of my own water bottle. The rain ended up being like a non-factor. I wore a tank top and shorts, and if anything, I got really warm. I was like pouring cold water on me throughout the day just to cool myself down. I think the humidity makes it really hard to cool down. I don't know if you know that, but more so than sun and heat. If it's humid, it's really hard for your body to cool itself down. But yeah, nutrition wise, it felt good. Energy wise, it felt good. My body felt really good. And I would 100% recommend this race to anyone who wants to run their first or their 50th marathon. I liked the size of it. I liked how it was run. It was really well organized. Logistically, it was much easier than, a race with like 40,000 people. Lots of hotels right near the start. I stayed like walking distance to the start. If you stay further out, like at an Airbnb, they did have like big parking garages that were like $10 for the day, which I think is a steal compared to like Chicago. So really just easy to navigate. I would imagine if it had been a really warm day, it would have been fairly difficult. There was not much shade anywhere, but I think any race that's a road race, 26 miles, is not going to be that well shaded. So I think that's it. I said I wanted to cover the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think the good was I felt really good. My nutrition was good. My mindset was really good. The bad, honestly, was just the conditions, the wind, and the ugly conditions too really did change sort of the pace of the race, but made me a stronger runner, made me a more confident runner, and made me want to do another one. So if you got any questions, let me know. But yeah, Indianapolis, I'd say 2 thumbs up to anyone that's thinking about running a marathon.